Hey everybody, it's Mike. I'm just going to roll right into this video journal. So if I keep looking away from the screen, it's because I'm referencing the video journal assignment prompt here so I can answer these questions. So we'll start right off with question number 1. What did I find interesting about the play? I found it pretty interesting that, I think that the playwriting was extremely brave and bold for its time, considering the content of the play. It's about, killing a king. I guess it kind of makes the king look human. After Macbeth kills King Duncan, and then he has all these feelings of paranoia and self-reflection and guilt. It kind of makes nobles look more kind of similar to the common folk, and that's kind of something that could have been dangerous during the time frame, the medieval times, and even the Renaissance period. That was, kings, monarchs were that was the political regime in place, so that could have been pretty dangerous. I thought it was pretty bold that Shakespeare would take that route and make it in this play. Question number 2, we're going on to 2 values that I thought were represented here. So value number 1 I found was ambition, and I feel that that's one of the main ones that drove the entire plot was Lady Macbeth and Macbeth's ambition, maybe a little bit more so Lady Macbeth, but their ambition to seize an opportunity to kill the king and usurp the throne and become the king. Macbeth can become the king himself. That was pretty ambitious, but I think that at the very end, in the end, it didn't turn out as well as he thought it would have. And I think that the moral of the story on that is that ambition is good if you're trying to better yourself and better your situation, but sometimes if too much ambition is a bad thing. Value number 2 would be betrayal or guilt, those feelings, and that's represented because, like I said, Macbeth betrayed the king and killed him, but there's evidence throughout the story of Macbeth, hallucinating. He's in a constant state of paranoia, and he reflects on his wrongdoings throughout the entire thing, and it basically almost drives him mad, and it shows that. Obviously killing somebody is hard, is a big deal, and it's definitely going to be something that weighs on a person's conscience, but it just shows that foregoing morals in general is not to be taken lightly, and it can weigh heavily on an individual. Moving on to question number 3, reading with a pencil. So I was reading this play, the script, with a pencil, and I stopped reading it with a pencil about halfway through once I realized that I was circling more than 50% of the content. So to say something that I didn't understand or needed additional research on would basically be saying the entire play. It's very hard for me to follow Shakespeare and comprehend his language and his metaphors and his analogies. I'll bring up one example real quick. This is one of the first passages in the entire play, and it says, "Doubtful it stood, as 2 spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art." I have no clue what that means, and that there's no context for it because that is the beginning of the passage. So I have, it goes on and talks, and I won't read the whole passage because 75% of the passage I don't understand. But that's just me having to get accustomed to that kind of language and learn it. But it shows that audiences at that time were accustomed to hearing that type of language. I mean, somebody on stage says that line once, and people were accustomed to hearing that type of that verbiage, that kind of descriptive language, and receptive to it. So I thought that was very interesting and very difficult for me. Question number 4, compare and contrast how gender is depicted in the play. So on the male side, most of the seats of power and political power, ruling power, were held by men. Positions in the military, the king, the nobles, those are all played by men. But there are also women play an instrumental role in this. Lady Macbeth, sorry about that. Lady Macbeth is the one behind this, basically playing puppet master with Macbeth. That's a lot of THs. To get him to actually, so she's essentially driving the main plot and the main action that sets the stage for the rest of the story. Another example of females playing a significant role is the witches, the 3 witches Throughout the story, especially in the mid to later story, you see most of the actions of the males being driven by prophecies that these witches did. You know, you'll see a character that says, "Oh, the witch, you know, the witches said X, so that must mean Y. So I need to do whatever possible to, you know, make sure Y happens or avoid, you know, Y or something like that." But they're, you know, these women played big roles. So I think that that represent, you know, as in terms of how it you know, what do these depictions suggest about the play as a whole? I think that it shows that there aren't any, and you know, gender does not play a part in how roles are played in these plays. That kind of segues into question 5. You know, considering how the play was performed originally with men filling women's roles, I think that's just a manifestation of how the roles that men and women play in the actual story were of, you know, somewhat, you know, of almost equal importance, if not equal importance. But you know, the fact that men back then, you know, that was the social norm for men to play women's roles. They were all equals on the stage because they were all men, but they were all equals on the stage because they were all playing significant roles. So I think that kind of shows, yeah, that kind of ties in with the whole gender thing, and to be honest, I think that fixes any of the gender inequality issues that may have existed. Period. So, at least in the playwriting world. And then finally, moving on to the last question. 2 questions about the play that I personally had. So, question number 1 is, why did Macbeth let Duncan's 2 sons live? You know, and what was his plan to deal with him? Because he kills King Duncan and takes over, but in the play it says the 2 sons fled, and I'm thinking, you know, is that something that Shakespeare did? And you know, was that something? Okay, I guess this is more of a question about Shakespeare. So, by letting the 2 sons live and flee, was that Shakespeare saying, "Oh, I have this great plot. You know, it's gone together so well. I just need to take care of these people." Not necessarily the lazy approach, but a quick, fast, easy approach to, hey, get rid of the kids. They're not important for the story. Just let them flee, and then, you know, never, you know, basically they're not important for the rest of the story. Or was it something that he did intentionally to kind of build suspense in the back of the audience's mind? For example, you know, if the kids flee, instead of them actually being killed, there's not a sense of closure there in terms of, for those characters. So those characters could necessarily come back and wreak havoc later on. You know, for example, a couple years down the road, after Macbeth's been king for a while, the 2 sons could come back and try to overthrow him. You know, but the audience doesn't know if they don't play a significant role from here on out. So did Shakespeare do that out of a necessity in terms of, I got to get rid of him because I'm you know, I just need these characters gone to move forward, or I need to create this kind of suspense in the back of the audience's mind? So I thought that was interesting. Did he do that information gap purposefully? Question number 2 is, you know, would Macbeth have actually killed Duncan? Would he have, you know, gathered up his internal strength to actually pursue his personally be able to pursue killing Duncan without Lady Macbeth pulling the strings and basically forcefully persuading him to do so? And then that kind of segues into the next, you know, another broader perspective is, what is Shakespeare's belief in fate versus free will? Because I think that specific part of the story, you know, was Macbeth fated to be king? You know, I don't. You could argue no, because he was just going to be in his role. I mean, it wasn't a crappy role by any means, but he wasn't going to be king. He was never fated to be king. He wasn't of the king's blood. He wasn't a relative of his. But he, of his own free will, I mean, you could argue that Lady Macbeth's free will, but of man's free will, he was able to pursue that goal. So is that kind of one of those overarching paradigms that you know, fate versus free will, that Shakespeare is trying to push through this? And I thought that was probably one of the most, you know, intriguing parts of the entire play. So I'm sorry this has gone on so long. I feel like these video journals are a trap to get me to get lengthy and wordy. But thanks for bearing with me again, everybody. My name's Mike, and take it easy.